this is the FIBA World Cup. It's been called the FIBA World Championships. I think the last two we've called it the World Cup, 19 and 23. One thing to note, they changed the order or the years in which you hold the FIBA World Cup. So it used to be you play the Olympics, off year, World Cup, off year, Olympics, off year, World Cup. Now, in 19, obviously 20 got screwed up because of COVID, but this year, 23, World Cup, 24, Olympics. So for some of the players who not only have a lot of weight to carry during the season and potentially go on deep playoff runs, they also have massive obligations to their shoe sponsors, to their different partners.
Yeah.
You're asking a lot. You are. You're asking a lot of guys to play back-to-back years. Let me start there. I want to get into the roster stuff in a second. But I just want to give a little history on the World Cup because the results should not be surprising, even though we're playing with NBA players. So we won the World Cup in 1986 with college players, didn't win in 1990. 94 was the first year we used NBA players in the World Cup. That roster had Shaq, Prime Reggie, Dominique Wilkins, Joe Dumars, Alonzo Mourning, Sean Kemp, Mark Price. They went 8-0. The only other two times we've won the World Cup were in 2010 and 2014. I'll get to those rosters in a second. 98 was a lockout year. We used European pro players, American players that played in Europe, and a couple college players. Lost to Russia in the semis. 2002, which was on our home turf in Indiana.
Crazy.
We went 6-3.
Indiana, of all places.
And lost in the quarters to Yugoslavia. And if you look back at that roster, you got a young, still, prime Paul Pierce, got a Jermaine O'Neal, monster, Sean Marion, Michael Finley, Bear Davis, Reggie Miller, Elton Brand. That was not a bad roster. 06, first Coach K year. That team was stacked. Dwight, LeBron, D. Wade, CP, Bosh, Melo. That was the first year where they were like, we're going to play a bunch of stars and role players. That's how we're going to build this roster out. So you had Battier, you had Brad Miller, you had Kirk Heinrich. We win gold in 2010. We win gold in 2014. 19 was the year that a bunch of guys said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason, similar to 2023, was because you're asking them to play in back-to-back years. And the thought process in 19, of course, was I'm then going to have to turn around and play in the 2020 Olympics. So that team, if you look, good players, top 5 leading scorers, Kemba Walker, Donovan Mitchell, Harrison Barnes, a young Jason Tatum, and Chris Middleton.
And Brown. That was kind of like
place.
It was kind of like the Boston Celtics.
And then 4th place this year with this roster.
Yeah.
So Steve Kerr says this isn't 1992 anymore. He's correct. The global game is better. The other teams are better. We're also not sending our best players. So that's important to note. We can get into the gameplay. We can get into why I think this roster could have been a little bit better. We can get into all that. Reality is we're not sending our best players to the World Cup anymore. The continuity is certainly a part of it. I agree with you on that. I think the understanding of FIBA rules, I'm watching games, for instance. And I don't think our guys were great at the fact that you can be in the lane for 3 seconds. There's no D3. Even Schroeder's blow by at the end of the game against Germany. The help should have been there on Austin Reeves. He's got Austin Reeves and ISO. What do you think he's going to do?
Yeah.
The help should have been there quicker.
Yeah.
There's no, and you watch the other team play defense against us, and they're packing the paint. And that's where I think the roster, I don't think we had enough shooting. I know Cam Johnson was on the roster. He's an incredible shooter. A bunch of these guys have shot 40% or close to 40% or better than 40% in their careers. Not in their careers, but in certain years in their careers. So it's not to say we don't have guys that can shoot the ball. But when I talk about shooting, I mean gravity. I mean actual gravity. I mean off-ball movement. The kid from Germany that killed us in the semifinals, right?
Yeah, Obst.
He's creating a reaction from the defense with all of his off-ball movement. where I think we were really heavy on ISO and really heavy on just a set pick and roll against a set defense.
Yeah.
And when you're not defending at a high level and you're not getting out in transition, you're going to have a hard time winning in FIBA.
Well, you could see it in the first Germany game. Even though we won, we came back and won. And this was sort of the gift and the curse of Ant, I feel like the whole time, was he had a couple games where he just went crazy, and that was kind of the first example of it. But it wasn't exactly good offense. It was just give him the ball and get out of the way.
Ant's going to bail us out.
Yeah. And it worked then, and it worked at other points in various quarters and things like that. But it probably is not a recipe for a championship, winning that way, especially when these other. It was interesting to see. It was like these other teams were running sets. Even the Montenegro game, which that is not a great team, and it was closer than it should have been. They were running way more offense than we were. Yeah. We were just out athleticism them. A question about the size thing, because this has been a big question since then. I was trying to just get actual numbers on this with Jaren and Memphis over the last couple of years. He really has not played center more than like 4 or 5 games in the last 2 seasons. It's either been Adams or Tillman. And so I guess my sort of overall question, it's easy to, Monday morning quarterback this a little bit, but why would we have a Team USA team where you have a guy, arguably 2 guys with Josh kind of playing the 4, but really one guy specifically who's like starting he's playing out of position on Team USA.
So I don't know and this is, a question probably for Grant Hill and the group that put this team together. My assumption is that they probably asked certain guys. I would love to have had Bam on the team.
Yeah.
When I think about rebounding, because look, Jalen gets, for his size, 5 rebounds a game. Tyrese is not a good rebounder for his size. Ant probably gets 5, 6 rebounds a game, whatever. Jaren Jackson Jr., not an elite defensive rebounder. One of the things that always stood out to me, said to me early in my career, my rookie year, BJ Armstrong, who was working for Wasserman, came down to Orlando. I wasn't playing a lot, and we had dinner afterwards. And we were talking about Dwight. And I've said this on the podcast before, but I want to say it again because I think it pertains to this conversation. The thing with Dwight, the thing that made him so special as a defensive player was not just the positioning and the block shots and all that. What made him special is that he could rebound outside of his space. And there weren't guys on this team outside of Josh Hart, who is a 6'5" wing, who consistently in their careers rebound outside of their space. So that was always going to be a problem. You get an off shooting game, you get another team that gets hot, we're going to have an issue. So I think this is not a knock on any player on that roster. It's not a knock on the people that put the roster together. Because I said 2 weeks ago after we lost, talking to the Dunker Spot guys, still feel very confident. I still like the roster. I still like the thought process of how they put it together. But the flaws showed themselves multiple times. Steve Kerr said something. It was a very Coach K-esque comment. He's like, these guys, I'm paraphrasing here. I feel bad because these guys are worthy of winning a championship.
Yeah.
This was a good group. And from the games, I didn't watch the New Zealand game. I watched pretty much every other game. From the games, I'm proud of our group. I don't think it was an effort issue. I go back to some roster limitations, and I go back to not quite grasping FIBA basketball because it is very different than the NBA, which brings me to my next thing that I want to say. I saw a lot of fucking weird discourse on Twitter bashing our guys, right? Started with Brandon Ingram, who I've already talked about. Coach Case said this about, I can't remember who he was talking to specifically about, but he said this. When these guys play for their national team, they turn into Michael Jordan. You think about Luis Scola, very good NBA player. Incredible for Argentina. Evan Fournier, very good NBA player for a number of years.
Amazing.
Last World Cup, he was Michael Jordan. At the Olympics, he was Michael Jordan for France. Patty's a little bit older. He killed us multiple times in the past.
Yeah.
28-point games, 32-point. Patty Mills turns into Michael Jordan.
In 20, he did.
Yeah. Dennis Schroeder this year. Go back to those Spanish teams. Like Rudy Fernandez, solid NBA player. Juan Carlos Navarro, he only came over here for 1 year. It was my rookie year. Averaged 11 points for Memphis. Really good player. Goes and plays for Spain. is Michael fucking Jordan. And so this brings me to why the knocking of our players is so ludicrous. Think about the human nature of this. You play a role on the Knicks. You play a role on the Pacers. You play a role on the Wolves. You play a role on the Nets. Whatever that role is, it's a role where you get to star. You get the ball in your hands. You get plays called for. You get to operate the offense. We're asking you to sacrifice. Let's flip that. You're the backup point guard. You're our spot-up shooter. You're a guy that's coming off catch and shoot. Your only thing you're going to do is play two-man game with Julius Randle. Now, you're on the national team. We're running every fucking play for you. Who do you think's more excited about their role? What is the human nature of that? Who do you think's more excited? The guys that are getting a bigger role or the guys that are getting a lesser role? And that's not to say they don't buy in. I'm just saying it is human nature that you're not going to be yourself in this setting. It is very hard.
To that point, even look at somebody like Rondae Hollis-Jefferson this year, who put up, we were calling him Kobe, who was putting up crazy numbers. Yeah. It's just basketball nature of when you have the ball in your hand, you're going to get warm. You know, you're going to be able to do this. And it's like, to what you're saying, there are guys who dominated the NBA this year, who were great on this team, who just did not get the number of shots that they probably needed to get comfortable. And that's just the reality of the way that the roster was made up. And it is unfortunate, but I think it's a really good point. My question on all of this, and this is maybe an unanswerable question, but how much of like this discourse and commentary is just like American arrogance? The COVID Olympics, we won, but we lost 3 times. People were freaking out at that point. Guys like Dame, their games didn't translate as well to the international, sort of basketball circuit. Like, to everything you've said over the last 20 minutes, this is not new. This has always been the case. And it feels like we wake up when these games happen. I felt this a lot during the Lithuania game, even though it didn't matter that much in this particular run, where people were like stunned that it happened. And it was like everybody was cracking jokes and everything like that. And I'm like, this is what, there's a version of this that always happens no matter who plays. I mean, this could happen with this dream team next year. We could lose to France or somebody like that in one of the qualifying games, and everyone's going to freak out again. And it's almost like the people just need to adjust their expectations to, we shouldn't go into these things expecting to win. We have to go in the same way that, everybody else is going into it.
I agree with that. I think, to Steve's point, he's spot on. The global game is excellent across the world. There are players everywhere. There are players that can't make the NBA that can thrive in this environment. And I think you're spot on in that the expectation shouldn't be that we are going to win gold. Oh, the expectation. It shouldn't be an afterthought that we're going to win gold. The expectation should be. Of course it should be. We have enough talent to win. Which brings me to a point, and I wonder if this was communicated, if it has been communicated over the years as this post-2004 Athens Olympics USA basketball program has evolved and has emphasized different things. But you go back to 08, you go back to 12, bring up 21. I'd have to specifically remember 16. I have to go back on that with the Rio games. But I know in the other ones, we had some of the greatest teams ever assembled in basketball in terms of talent. And I believe, too, in terms of fit. Some of the greatest teams ever assembled. Those teams won gold. Ask D. Wade if 08 was easy.
Yeah.
Right? Ask CP if 12 was easy.
Yeah.
Ask Book if 21 was. It's not easy at this level to win gold.
Yeah.
And I think we need to reframe the entire conversation. But most importantly, we need to stop with the FIBA NBA. This guy, he's got exposed. What the fuck? Fine, he got exposed in FIBA.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean Brandon Ingram is an all-NBA type player.